Ooh. It's cold as a well digger. It's colder than a witch's pretty cold out here this morning. In a small park close to my house. Just after 7 a.m., sun's just come up. Gonna look for some dabs of color in the remaining leaves that are still on the trees. 2 nights ago we had pretty good winds, followed by pretty heavy rain, and then it snowed. So typically all of that will contribute towards stripping the leaves off the trees, but we're still holding a few leaves and some remaining color, so we're pretty lucky. Let's walk down through here and see what we see. Just up there, beyond that big tree, there are at least 3 deer I've come across. And I guess they're fairly used to people because there's a highway there and a neighborhood right on the other side of these trees. And so it's a relatively urban environment. But we have deer. Come up with a composition with the rising sun right behind some trees which are casting shadows right at the camera, and I've got a piece of fallen wood as a foreground interest. Right now I'm working to try to pull focus from the deadfall through infinity, and I had to raise the camera a bit because there was a tangency between the top of the deadfall foreground interest and the trunk of one of the trees. So I've raised the camera, get a little higher, get a little more separation between those 2 design elements. I shot my final composition from this general area here, letting one of the trees in the distance actually act as a go-between between my camera lens and the flare of the sun. It helped matters a lot, and I bracketed that f/22 at a ½ second and f/22 at 1 second. And I think either one of them will pull the dynamic range with this large format camera or large sensor in this medium format camera. But I have the 2 different exposures if I have to blend some light areas and dark areas together. Roughly, here's what we've got going on with this composition. The foreground is where that rock starts to curve. In the distance from you, it's pretty wide, but I've got a equivalent of a 51 millimeter lens on the medium format camera, so that's in the foreground. And there's just a tunnel of trees that leads to this partly cloudy sky. I've got a polarizer on here. Cranked it to where the sky is the darkest. I'm going to leave it fully polarized because this is an equivalent to a normal lens on here, and I shouldn't have any problem with polarizing this angle of view fully. So let's take a few pictures and see what turns out. I have to constantly remind myself to narrow my focus to a smaller vista, if you will. I keep wanting to get the grand and epic horizon to horizon shot, and it's not always there, and I tend to walk by and or sometimes step on a nice shot that's at my feet or somewhere between my nose and the ground. Good lesson to remember. I found something a little more intimate with the remaining snow and a curled up leaf. So I've done a macro here on this log. Nick Page made a comment, I guess in his most recent vlog, recent being sometime slightly before today, the 14th of November 2019, about streaming backlight. And I had commented to him that I was like him, it's hard to walk by a scene where the backlight is streaming through leaves, especially fall leaves. But backlighting just is a special thing. So low angle lighting and backlighting is why we tend to favor the mornings and the evenings, the golden hours and the blue hours. But it always catches my eye. I'm sure I'm not alone out there. At least I know Nick has a similar weakness for it. Pays just to look around. I'm going to walk up the path here with this long lens on and see what we see. Lucky enough to spy some tiny mushrooms growing on a dead log who fell. That fell. Sometimes I do this little exercise where I'll just plant myself and start looking around, and I'll have my camera at hand, and if I see something from the point of view from where I'm sitting and it's appropriate for the lens I have mounted, I'll just try to pick up a composition. And they're usually very simple. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they're just filler. Sometimes you get something really nice. I've got a maple leaf here in the clutter of a bunch of other leaves under it, but the maple leaf is a more gold color. The leaves behind it are brown and a little more weathered, and so it pops out in a very subtle way. And in the composition, I've got a twig or a piece of branch that has a slight curve, and it loosely frames the leaf. We'll see how that looks. If I like it when I get it on the screen, I'll show it to you. If I don't, let's forget we had this conversation. Walk with me. Thanks for joining me for an early morning walk in the woods. I don't know if we got anything worth looking at, but we got out. We had fun, at least I did. If you like what you see, give me a big thumbs up. Share what you see if you like it. And subscribe if you're afraid you're going to miss something in the near future. I'm here every Monday, sometimes late Sunday. I'll see you next week. Thank you much. Shawita.